Hello, hi, and welcome to this week's episode of my energy story of the energy talk. So, on this episode of mine, I have with me Kristen Bush. Well, I always say this, but their bios are always quite intimidating. I'm going to read out Kristen's bio here. So, Kristen is currently a second year student in energy systems at UC Davis, currently studying her master's degree, and she is interested in energy justice and currently researching the implications of electrification of heavy duty vehicles, specifically the charging infrastructure needed and the impact it has on disadvantaged communities. Prior to that, she did her bachelor's in chemical engineering, where her interest in alternative fuels and energy management grew to various leadership positions. So on that note, I would say, welcome, Kristen. Hi, thank you for having us on this episode of My Energy Story.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, what caught my attention was the Corley engineer. So why the Corley engineer? Why did you give yourself that name?
Mostly because my natural hair. When I started the account, initially I was like, it might be fun to have a natural hair account. But then I just tied it to my interest in energy because it's been fun to kind of participate in that outreach and just share about different topics related to the energy sector. So it's been a good outlet for me in that.
Yeah, so did you see yourself in the energy industry, right? This thing of when you're very small, they ask you, what did you want to be? What would you be when you grow up? Did you see yourself in that specific space, even up until now?
I think probably around high school was when I really started getting interested in energy in some way. I didn't have a specific idea as to how I would get there. It was at that time, it was kind of something that I thought was really cool and really interesting. So it was one thing that I thought would be nice to pursue, but I had no idea how it would play out or, what kind of people I would meet or what opportunities there were.
But then looking at where you are right now, it's like you pretty much already have your feet solidified in there with energy justice and then heavy size infrastructures and that's moving systems. What this question I always ask myself is, we know transportation plays a big role when it comes to alternative energy, of which we have that is air travel and road transport. And like I read in your bio, you are specifically looking at how this heavy duty vehicles can play a part in alternative energy. So I would ask, how far have you gone with that, and what have you seen? I would want this is me asking you to share your thoughts and your opinions on that in that regard.
Mm-hmm. I think from what I've learned so far, the electrification in the heavy duty sector is still something that isn't as, I would say, as familiar as maybe like light duty or like medium duty vehicles, so more of the passenger vehicle side. I had an internship at the independent system operator in California, and I remember talking to someone in the renewable integration group about like how far they think they've come along as far as electrification in the heavy duty sector, just because that sector accounts for so many emissions. And from what they say, like they know a lot more about passenger vehicles, only because there's a lot more policies in place that are like specifically related to those vehicles. But as far as a heavy duty, it's something that still needs to be looked into. And so that's what I'm hoping the project that I'm a part of can hopefully answer, as far as what impacts there are to disadvantaged communities, and then seeing how utilities benefit from that and whether or not that kind of interaction is actually, mutually beneficial for disadvantaged communities. So it's something that I think a lot of people are thinking about and wanting to find concrete answers to. So we'll see how it continues, but it'll be interesting when we get to real conclusions on that.
Yeah, it will be because at the end of the day, the main reason for all this is to have policies in place that put some sort of buffer or some sort of stop or some sort of rebate on what these guys do and how far things can be done the right way. So how does this then tie into energy justice? Because I mean, I think that's part of what you also are interested in. So how does everything now tie into energy justice?
I think in terms of energy justice, it's important to take account for like marginalized communities, how they're being affected by these policies. Because I think one thing that could be concerning at times is that there's policies being developed and being put in place that don't necessarily directly account for disadvantaged communities. So a lot of them have different quotas or percentages as far as the impact to disadvantaged communities it should have, or how many disadvantaged communities this policy should benefit. But what I'm more interested in is having it more specific to different communities, because not every community requires the same thing or wants the same thing as far as different policies being put in place. So I don't want the policies to be kind of just a general thing to just be applied to to be applied to every community. I think it really should be, there should be aspects of social justice in there as well, and being able to communicate with communities to actually see what do you need, because you know having that perspective is, I think, what makes policies more well-rounded, because you're getting more specific into what can be done and what the community wants, as opposed to what sounds good on paper. So that's where I'm hoping policy continues to move towards.
Yeah, and I mean, with everything you've said so far, my question here is, did you, I mean, because you're currently taking your second degree, right? You're currently on your second degree. So did you firm all this in place in second degree or in your first degree?
I think my first degree was kind of where I first kind of got my initial exposure to it. I went into chemical engineering because in my mind, what the idea I had of it was, okay, I'll be able to experiment with chemicals or something to make different fuels, or be involved in those kinds of projects to have alternative energy sources. But that initial experience, what I saw more of, I think because our program was more tailored to oil and gas, so it was mainly refinery oriented. There are a lot of other chemical engineering majors that were interested in energy the way I was, as far as wanting to find alternative fuels and wanting to be involved in alternative energy. But at times it was a little bit disheartening to see that so many of the opportunities that we were shown, like whether it was internships with major refineries, it didn't necessarily have that aspect of energy justice there. It felt more of, this is the program that you're in, this is what you typically do, and these are the opportunities that are typically afforded to you. So initially I felt like I was boxed in a way. And that's not to say that every major gives you exactly what you're looking for. There's pros and cons to everything. But when I was in my first major, that's when, I started thinking more about, what kind of impact I want to have on people and how I want to help communities. And I felt like sticking to the oil and gas route wasn't necessarily what I wanted. And it didn't really give me that kind of cooperation with communities that I was looking for. So going into my second program for my master's, that was when I felt like I could really dig deeper into this aspect of social justice and energy, and not only having it so I could say, oh, I'm doing these cool projects and I'm meeting these cool people and all of these interesting things are happening, but I think in the program I'm in now, I really feel like I can make a positive change and a positive difference. And I think it's something that'll continue to grow in this sector, just this aspect of justice and energy. hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it does for me because you've said that you were not fully open, you weren't even fully aware of the options that were for you. You went in there with the mindset of, oh, mixing chemicals together or oil and gas, but then further realization just made you understand, oh, there are other alternatives to this. And
mhm,
what you just said, if I tie that back to your social media account, that's Instagram, I can see that that is pretty much, if I'm not, this is a question now, this is pretty much almost around the same time you started posting and started being a bit more open about your choices in terms of academic choices and what you were doing. Because I look back at when you posted your very first video or your very first post, and I can see that this is where you're introducing yourself, or you were almost towards the end of your first degree and starting your second degree. And my question is that, so what made you be more open to posting on there and sharing? Because what you said at first was the quality engineer was just a place for you to just share your natural hair goals and your natural hair journey. So what I
mhm,
changed to be more open about what you do, because I would say that social media right now is not necessarily as it is, because I mean everybody is just about the fun, about it's just about the fun and the thrills. But then seeing someone that
mhm.
posts about schoolwork, pretty much straight down academic stuff, it's quite a long one. It's quite a hard one to continue with.
Yeah, when I first got the idea to start the account, I was pretty uncomfortable initially just because I was like, oh, it's gonna be like this public page, and I don't know what everyone's gonna say about it. But I typically get pretty nervous when it comes to like sharing things about myself. So with that, like you said, it initially I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll just do a natural hair journey page or whatever. But I'm not as passionate about that as I am the energy sector. And for me, knowing that account isn't necessarily the typical like influencer
Mhm.
style, because I try to share things about myself as far as what I'm learning and what the journey I'm on in the energy sector. But I knew when I continued with that page that I didn't necessarily want it to be solely about me. Like, not to say there's anything wrong with it, but I realized that having that kind of platform it's good to have some kind of like educational posts or something that people can learn from. Because I think one of the things I'm motivated by is really just helping others and being in a position where I feel like I can, make good decisions as far as being mindful of what I'm sharing and having good intentions with it. But I think that with the page overall, I want it to be a learning experience as much as I can give, because there's moments where I feel like, oh well, I'm not really qualified to do this. Like I'm not a professor, any of those things. But I realized when I continued in it that it was just something I really enjoy doing, and I think I there was a part of me that was worried like, oh, maybe it's just a little too nerdy or like maybe it's just too niche. I don't know, but it was it's something that I've enjoyed doing, and I'm glad that I decided to take this route because it was uncomfortable at first. It's a step out of my comfort zone, but I'm really thankful that I have that kind of opportunity to educate.
So, and how far is that going now in terms of the platform itself? Have you been able
Mhm.
to for as much people? What is the interaction on there for you? Like, is it a platform you would boldly say that you are actually influencing people to do the right decisions, make right decisions in terms of, say, academic goals, or even related to what you do, energy justice and EVs and the rest of that? Are you like what's with the interactions on there with regards to informations like that?
USR's like interactions with other people.
No, like
Is
pretty much
or
like the page itself, because like I said, on social media, it's quite a hassle to find people that are interested in conversations like this. So you
Mm-hmm.
had this for this long and still continue on there. There's bound to be questions like, okay, is there something positive that people are getting out of this? Do you actually have such engagement from the audience itself, from people that come on to you to ask, oh, how do I do this, or how do I do this, or is this the right way to go, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think the page itself is still pretty new, but so I don't get as much engagement all the time. But usually when I do, I like to communicate with other people, or if they have questions about
Mm-hmm.
whatever the topic is on that post, like being able to, be a space where people can talk about that with each other. That there's not as many people that are interested, and I think growing in terms of people wanting to be involved and people wanting to find a place in the clean energy transition. But I do think that sometimes it can be difficult to like find that kind of audience just because it is so specific, and I feel like in energy there's something that everyone can learn, but I also understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea, or not everyone is passionate about it like others are, or like I am, or like you are. So yeah, I'm hoping that as I continue that engagement can kind of grow, and not from a standpoint of, oh, I'm just getting so many people coming to this page or whatever, but really wanting to create some kind of community, or at least doing the best I can in trying to facilitate that.
I mean, you're right with everything you've said so far. It's even, I mean, the energy talk itself, I'm not saying it's very, I mean, I'm not saying it's very, very difficult to actually grow engagement with issues like this. I think it's the fact where not many youths are open to conversations like this. Or it's either the point of they don't know, there's no access to information, or they don't
Mm-hmm.
where the such things exist. Because I still get questions of, okay, what job opportunities are there for ladies or women in the energy industry, or what can we do? Because they still have this cliche thought of, okay, it's a male dominated industry that ladies cannot actually find ourselves in. And
Mm-hmm.
when I saw, I mean, come on, it's still searching Instagram. I saw your page, so you are getting the interactions that I would definitely give you. So yes, and then jumping off of that, I will then ask down to what you have Reflection Fridays. I call it the R square. Rather the RM. So I'm like, that is very, I mean, the part where you said you get nervous, for me, it's usually, I mean, this is me talking from personal experience right now. When I want to put very personal stuff on social media, it's very cringe for people because my questions are, how are they going to think about this? Like, am I sure this person sees me in the right light? But then you came out forcefully, and then the next day, Reflection Fridays are out. I'm like, well, how does she do this? Like, how does she stuff on there?
It's something that I kind of tell myself I challenge myself to do, because again, it's one of those things where you're being vulnerable and sharing your experiences, and so when I do those posts, I usually have to push through that initial self-doubt of oh, I don't think this is important, or like, oh, I don't think this is a big deal. But I think it just comes down to wanting to share what I've experienced from a learning standpoint, and trying to look back on what I've done and kind of the journey that I found myself on, and seeing where different parts of that journey can maybe people can identify with those things. Because I think that with the Reflection Fridays that I do, I haven't done one in a little bit, but I'll get on that. But but with the Reflection Fridays I do, I think it's nice for other people to see it, just because it what I want to do with that is to make it more, I don't exactly want to say normalized, but making it okay to share those experiences that I had, and, making people feel comfortable and maybe sharing their own journeys, or maybe looking back at, their own experiences to see like where they can learn and where, maybe they can help others with their experiences. And then the other part of it for me is that it's helpful for me to just have that moment of reflection for myself. So when I do the Reflection Fridays, it's kind of an opportunity for me to see, okay, this is what happened. Like maybe it was a good situation, maybe it was not so good, but there's a learning experience in everything. And so I like to use those to kind of ground me in that, and just knowing that, whether you got something good out of an experience, there's always a lesson at the end of the day. And that kind of helps me see other situations, or, other opportunities I have as, there's always something to learn, even if it's not something that I would like to learn, or something that, is as positive of a learning experience. There's something I can take with me from it.
Because for me, from your Reflections Friday, I picked out there was something you wrote about self-doubt. And maybe it was the moment in time I read it, but that it resonated with me so deep. And I keep thinking to myself, because I think, for me, I think self-doubt comes every time you have something big you want to work on, or something big that you want to push out, and you're there second guessing everything about yourself. Like, do I think I can do this? And the amazing thing about it is that people actually see you way bigger than you see yourself. And I'm here asking myself, why am I doing all this thing? And I was like, okay, she has put out a post about this. I think we go through the same stuff. So, and you know what, at the end of the day, it goes to show that outside of your curly hair journey, outside of energy justice that you post about, outside of EVs and anything that has to do with energy that you talk about, Reflections Friday is something that everybody deals with. Be you in the accounting firm, be you in every aspect of life. These are challenges that we always have to go through. So, and no matter how much we beat ourselves about it or get so down and depressed about it, when I think about the fact that someone also goes through the same thing and they are open to talking about it or even writing about it, it makes you assured that they're definitely going to go through it, regardless if you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Certainty is that you're going to come out of it and you're going to feel strong and you're going to feel definitely full of yourself after you must have done that thing that you were supposed to do, because there's just no how you're not going to do it at the end of the day. So, I mean, that's one thing I've learned from Reflections Friday. So, yes, I think you have to get back on that, because outside of, like you said, not everybody might be interested in the energy that you talk about or has the curly hair like you post about, but Reflections Friday, they definitely have something to resonate with. It's either with self-doubt or because you posted about pressure too. And I'm actually going back to that. Back to that. But I mean, so these are things I'm picking up because they're things I have seen have happened with myself. And I ask, okay, how did you deal with this? How did you deal with that? But when I read from people I like, I'm like, okay, I think they did that, so I can do that myself. So going back to pressure, I'm going to ask, like, how do you deal with pressure, either coming from schoolwork or from internships or from everything you put yourself doing at the same time?
Yeah. But thank you for your words on the Reflection Fridays. That's helpful for me. But as far as pressure, I think the biggest pressure that I feel is either like internal pressure, or it's like this time pressure. I realized for myself that one thing that I tend to do is I say yes to a lot of things. So whether that's like clubs or like a panel or something like that, I have this instinct to where, like, if I feel like there's a need, or I feel like I can support in some way or help in some way, then I automatically am like, yes, I can do that. Like, let me think about it, and I'll be there to help. But I also realize it's okay to take time for myself when I need it, and not necessarily feeling like I have to take on additional commitments or, you know, and I think that for me, where I get confused sometimes is, there might be opportunities that sound like really good, and thinking about it, they are really good opportunities, but, at the same time, I have to be honest with myself as far as what I can handle, and not necessarily from the standpoint of, I'm not capable of doing that, or, I'm not qualified or whatever. It's just, it's okay to take a break when you need it. So when I feel like I'm getting a lot of pressure, whether that is external or internal pressure, that's when I really have to take a step back and kind of calm down, um, and then think about how I want to prioritize different things. For me, one thing that really grounds me is my faith, and so that's something I lean on every day. And when I do feel there's some kind of pressure or otherwise, that's when I have to allow myself to, calm myself and, take some moments to breathe. And one thing that I think a lot of people also struggle with is this idea of, having to be busy all the time. That's something that definitely in undergrad too, I felt like I just had to do everything. And, it's not a bad thing to, be ambitious and, wanting to do things or wanting to participate in things. I think it mainly comes down to, I may not be able to handle it, not because I'm not capable of doing it, but because, mentally, I can't take it on or, overload myself with too much. And that's one thing that I still struggle with from time to time. But I'm learning more that it's okay to relax when you need to, or, finding that time for yourself.
Yeah, prioritization, like you said. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned ambition, and I always ask this question. So I feel like ambition varies, and there are different things. There are different underlying reasons why people get ambition. So, where does the ambition stem from? From money? Are you money ambitious, or your fulfillment tied ambitious? Which one is it?
I would say the ambition I have mainly comes from, thinking about what I can do for other people. It's not necessarily a money ambitious thing, like even though it is nice to have a stable income and to be able to afford things. Um, but I think I'm ambitious in a lot of the things that I do just because sometimes it's a good or bad thing, but I like to expect the best of myself. And then I try to do that not to the point where I feel like I'm pressuring myself or, feel like I have to perform at a certain capacity. I think I'm just really driven to wanting to support other people. I'm someone that tends to think about others before I think about myself. And sometimes that, it's usually a good thing,
Yeah.
but, sometimes it comes like back to what we were talking about being pressured. If someone asks for help, then I don't immediately say no. Like sometimes I'll just be like, oh yeah, I can do that. That's fine. Um, but trying not to overextend myself with it too, because I think it's really good to have that, wanting to help people and support people, but you also have to think about yourself as far as, are you getting burned out? Are you overextending yourself? But back to the ambition part. Yeah, I would say my ambition is mainly people driven. I'm not necessarily driven to accomplish things for myself. It's, what I find enjoyment in what I'm doing now. I really enjoy the aspects of being able to collaborate with other people, or, you know, if we're working on a project, working on something that has a common goal or something that is motivated by helping others.
Mhm.
And that's where I get a lot of my drive and ambition from.
Yeah, I mean, that's very valid. So I would say that you are equal high empathy then.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right then. I think I pretty much touched on everything on this note. And from everything I've gathered so far, you have even recognized what your weaknesses are. You know what your strengths are to an extent. And you know how to balance both, even if sometimes you take on a lot more than you can handle. So yeah, I'm gonna leave the conversation with this with something I think I saw on your page, and it goes that while it's important to celebrate during the good times, it's equally important to recognize, and it's equally important to recognize the moments in our lives that are a little more challenging. So I think it everything just ties down to everything you said so far. That I mean, even with what I said in the beginning, that it could be yet super beautiful and as in whatever good it is that we're looking forward to getting, but then it's also quite challenging at the same time. And as much as we're able to open our minds to accept everything that comes with it, I think that is where the growth starts to happen for every one of us. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you very much for having me, having the energy talk on this segment. So you growing and everything that you have for yourself. Do have a good day, Kristen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all for having me.
Thank you, sir.